They mocked the new kid's stutter, then froze when he stepped into the ring. The fluorescent lights of Westridge High School buzzed overhead as Elijah Chen kept his eyes fixed on the scuffed linoleum floor. At 15, he was smaller than most boys his age, with rounded shoulders and a slender frame that seemed to collapse inward, as if trying to make himself invisible. His dark hair fell across his forehead in a way that conveniently hid his eyes when he needed it to, which was often. Today marked his 3rd week at Westridge, and he'd already established a routine: walk quickly, speak rarely, and avoid the cafeteria's center tables at all costs. The stutter that had followed him since childhood made every introduction an exercise in humiliation, so he'd learned to navigate new schools with as few words as possible. "Ha-ha-hi," he practiced under his breath as he approached his locker, the familiar knot forming in his stomach. Speaking was like trying to push words through a kinked garden hose. They would back up, creating pressure until they finally burst out in awkward spurts. Back in San Francisco, after years of speech therapy, his classmates had grown accustomed to his halting speech. But here in this suburban Colorado town, he was starting from scratch. Elijah spun the combination lock with practiced ease, ignoring the loud group of boys who dominated the hallway several lockers down. Their ringleader, a muscular junior named Damon Wright, held court every morning, his voice carrying over the general din. With his Letterman jacket and carefully tousled blonde hair, Damon looked like he'd been assembled from parts of every bully in every teen movie ever made. Flanking him were his 2 constant companions, Tyler Reed, a tall, lanky basketball player with a perpetual smirk, and Marcus Green, whose broad shoulders strained against his tight t-shirts, a walking advertisement for the school's weight room. Elijah had managed to avoid their direct attention for 2 weeks and 6 days. That streak ended when he accidentally dropped his physics textbook, the heavy tome landing with a reverberating slap against the floor. The noise drew Damon's attention like a shark to blood. "Yo, new kid," he called out, his voice cutting through the hallway chatter. Elijah pretended not to hear, quickly crouching to retrieve his book. "I'm talking to you, China boy," Damon persisted, strolling over with Tyler and Marcus in tow. "I'm actually KK Korean," Elijah mumbled, immediately regretting engaging. I'm actually KK Korean," Damon mocked, his face contorting into an exaggerated impression. "Tyler," and Marcus snickered behind him. Heat flooded Elijah's face. He clutched his textbook tighter, knuckles whitening. "What's your name, Stutterbox?" Damon leaned against the lockers, towering over Elijah. Elijah, he managed, the word feeling like gravel in his throat. Elijah, Damon repeated, drawing out the stutter to uproarious laughter from his friends and several onlookers. "What's wrong, Elijah? Cat got your tongue?" Elijah's eyes darted around the hallway, looking for an escape route or, less likely, a teacher, but the faculty of Westridge seemed to operate on an unspoken policy of strategic blindness when it came to hallway interactions. "Leave him alone," came a quiet voice. A girl with curly hair and glasses had paused nearby, clutching her books to her chest. "Mind your business, Lisa," Tyler snapped, and the girl hesitated before continuing down the hallway, throwing an apologetic glance over her shoulder. "Better get to class, Elijah," Damon said, abruptly losing interest, but offering a final shoulder check that sent Elijah stumbling into the lockers. "We'll catch up later." As the trio sauntered away, laughter trailing behind them, Elijah took a deep breath and closed his locker. What they didn't know, what nobody at Westridge knew, was that back in San Francisco, Elijah spent 6 days a week at Golden Dragon Muay Thai, training under former Thai champion Ajahn Somchai. For the past 7 years, the gym had been Elijah's second home, the place where he transformed from the hesitant boy with a stutter into the Quiet Storm, his fighting nickname, earned after winning 3 junior championships. Inside the ring, Elijah never stuttered. His body spoke with a fluency his mouth couldn't match, each strike and movement a clear, articulate statement, but his mother's job transfer had uprooted him from his gym family, landing him here in this new town where no one knew about the power coiled beneath his unassuming exterior. "Keep your head down," his mother had advised. "Focus on grades, not fighting. We don't want any trouble at the new school." So Elijah had promised to stay out of trouble, to use his training only in registered competitions or in genuine self-defense. He'd already located a Muay Thai gym 20 minutes from their new home, but hadn't yet found the courage to go in and introduce himself to the trainers. The thought of stuttering through that introduction had kept him away. The first bell rang, and Elijah hurried to his American history class. The encounter with Damon leaving a sour taste in his mouth, he slipped into his seat at the back corner just as Mr. Hendricks began his lecture on the Civil War. "Mr. Chen," the teacher called suddenly, making Elijah flinch. "Since you were late to join our class this semester, would you mind reading the second paragraph on page 204? Elijah's stomach dropped. Public reading was his personal hell. He began, but the words jammed in his throat. "Today, Mr. Chen," Mr. Hendricks prompted, seemingly oblivious to Elijah's distress. From 2 rows ahead, Damon turned and smirked, clearly anticipating the show. "The C Confed," Elijah struggled, his face burning as snickers rippled through the classroom. "Confederate," Mr. Hendricks supplied impatiently. "Confederate Army marched north into Pennsylvania." Each word was torture, each syllable a battle. "Maybe we should come back to you after you've practiced," Mr. Hendricks finally said, cutting him off. "Ms. Rodriguez, would you continue?" As a girl with a ponytail picked up reading smoothly where Elijah had faltered, he sank lower in his seat, wishing he could disappear entirely. "In the ring, I'm not afraid," he reminded himself. "In the ring, I'm powerful." But school wasn't a ring, and here he was just the new kid with a stutter. Over the next few weeks, Damon and his friends made Elijah their favorite target. They called him Elijah in exaggerated voices when they passed him in the hallways. They knocked his lunch tray in the cafeteria, sending his food skidding across the floor. They left notes in his locker with crude drawings mocking his speech. Each incident tested Elijah's promise to his mother. Each taunt made his hands itch to form fists to show them what he was capable of. But he restrained himself, channeling his frustration into late-night training sessions in his garage, where he'd set up a heavy bag. He punched and kicked until his muscles burned, imagining Damon's smug face on the bag. By the 6th week at Westridge, Elijah had made exactly one friend, Lisa Kwan, the girl who had briefly stood up for him that first day. She was a sophomore like him, a quiet academic achiever who shared his AP physics class. "You should just report them," Lisa said one day, as they sat in the library during study hall, whispering behind shelves of encyclopedias nobody ever touched. To who?" Elijah replied. "The T teachers see everything and do nothing." "Principal Hayes, then," she persisted. "He has a zero-tolerance policy." Elijah shook his head. That would just make things worse. He'd seen what happened to kids who tattled at his previous schools. Lisa sighed, adjusting her glasses. "Well, what about speech therapy? The school has a program." "I've done speech therapy for 7 years," Elijah cut in. "It helps, but it doesn't fix everything." He didn't mention how his stutter nearly disappeared when he spoke about Muay Thai or when he was in the ring. Those were precious secrets he kept close. "I just hate seeing them treat you like this," Lisa said, her voice tinged with frustration. Elijah offered a small smile. "I've dealt with worse." What he didn't tell Lisa was that he'd finally gathered the courage to visit Colorado Kickboxing Academy the previous weekend. After stuttering through his introduction to Coach Mike, a former UFC fighter, he demonstrated his skills. The coach had been impressed enough to invite him to train there, even suggesting Elijah consider an upcoming amateur tournament. For the first time since moving, Elijah felt a spark of hope, a connection to his old life. Maybe Colorado wouldn't be so bad after all. That spark was quickly extinguished the following Monday when Damon and his crew cornered Elijah in the boys' bathroom. "Heard you were hanging out with Lisa," Damon said, blocking the exit. "What's wrong? Can't find friends who talk like you?" "Leave me alone," Elijah said, trying to step around them. Tyler pushed him back. "Where you going, Stutterbox? We're just having a friendly chat." "Maybe he needs a swirly to help clear his throat," Marcus suggested, eyeing the toilet stools. Elijah felt his heart rate accelerate, not from fear but from the controlled anger he cultivated in training. He measured the distance to the door, calculating his odds. "I don't want trouble," he said quietly. "Too bad, because trouble wants you," Damon replied, grabbing Elijah's backpack and tossing it to Marcus, who promptly dumped its contents into the nearest sink, turning on the faucet. Elijah watched as water soaked his notebooks and textbooks. His homework, assignments dissolved into soggy pulp. His phone, thankfully in his pocket, was spared. "Oops," Marcus grinned, turning off the water. Something in Elijah wanted to snap, to show them exactly what he was capable of, but instead, he took a deep breath, centering himself the way Ajahn Somchai had taught him. "You're pathetic," he said with surprising steadiness. Damon's eyes narrowed. "What did you just say to me?" "You heard Mimi." Elijah met his gaze directly for the first time. For a moment, something like uncertainty flickered across Damon's face, but it quickly hardened back into contempt. "You're dead tomorrow, Chen." Watch your back." The trio left, shoving him into the wall as they passed. Elijah stared at his ruined schoolwork, a cold determination settling in his chest. He was tired of being a target, tired of hiding who he was. His promise to his mother echoed in his mind, but so did Ajahn Somchai's words, "Respect yourself first, or no one else will." Something has to change, he thought as he salvaged what he could from the sink, and soon. The breaking point came during 7th period PE 2 days later. Coach Brenner had organized the class into basketball teams, and through either cruel intention or oblivious chance, Elijah found himself on the opposite team from Damon, Tyler, and Marcus. "Chen," Coach called out, "you're team captain against Wright's team." A collective murmur swept through the gathered students. Nobody wanted to be on the new kids' team, especially against the 3 most athletic juniors in class. The game started predictably, enough with Damon's team pulling ahead quickly. Elijah wasn't bad at basketball. His Muay Thai training gave him good footwork and coordination, but he was against players who had been on the school team for years. "Pass the ball, Stutter." "Boy!" Damon taunted after stealing the ball from Elijah for the 3rd time. Throughout the game, the taunts grew worse. An accidental elbow to Elijah's ribs, a trip that sent him sprawling across the court. By the 4th quarter, Coach Brenner had called multiple fouls but did little else to intervene. The final straw came when Elijah was dribbling toward the basket and Marcus stuck out his foot. Elijah went down hard, skidding across the polished wooden floor, his palms and knees burning from the friction. Laughter erupted from Damon's teammates and many of the spectators on the bleachers. "Walk much, Elijah," Damon called out, high-fiving Marcus. Something inside Elijah shifted. A boundary crossed, a decision made. He rose slowly to his feet, his expression unnervingly calm. "You know what?" Elijah said, his voice steady and clear. No stutter, no hesitation. "I'm done with this. Diente form." Jim fell quiet at his transformed voice. "What did you say?" Damon asked, genuinely surprised by Elijah's sudden fluency. "I said I'm done," Elijah repeated, stepping closer to Damon. "You think you know me? You don't know anything about me." Coach Brenner finally moved toward them. "That's enough." "No." "Coach," Elijah interrupted, still without a stutter. "It's not enough. These guys have been harassing me for weeks and you've done nothing." Damon smirked, though there was a new uncertainty behind his eyes. "Look who finally learned to talk." "I know how to do a lot more than talk," Elijah replied. He turned to Coach Brenner. "Do you still have that boxing unit later this semester?" Coach looked confused. "Yeah, we do some basic boxing in the spring." "Move it up," Elijah suggested. "Today now." A murmur rippled through the gym. Coach Brenner hesitated. Then something in Elijah's steady gaze made him nod slowly. "All right, Johnson, get the gloves from the equipment room." 15 minutes later, the basketball game forgotten, the class gathered around a makeshift ring created by gymnasium mats. "We'll do some basic sparring," Coach announced. "Protective gear, controlled contact. Who wants to go first?" "I do," Elijah said immediately, stepping forward. He'd already wrapped his hands with the athletic tape Coach provided, with the practiced precision of someone who'd done it countless times before. "All right, Chen, who's your opponent?" Elijah looked directly at Damon. "What do you say, right?" "Unless you're scared of the stutter boy," he deliberately mocked his own stutter, throwing Damon's taunts back at him. The assembled students let out a collective, "Oh!" Damon's face flushed. Trapped by his own reputation, he stepped forward. "Let's do this." They donned headgear and gloves, facing each other in the center of the mat while Coach Brenner reviewed the rules. Clean hits only, stop when he called it. No excessive force. Just basic boxing, Coach emphasized. Jabs and straight punches. Only no wild swings. The moment Coach stepped back, Damon charged forward with a wide, powerful swing that would have connected solidly if Elijah had still been standing there. But he wasn't. With the fluid movement of a seasoned fighter, Elijah sidestepped, his body relaxed, balanced on the balls of his feet. Confusion registered on Damon's face as his momentum carried him forward into empty space. Before he could recover, Elijah snapped out a perfect jab that connected with Damon's headgear, snapping his head back. The gym went silent. Damon shook his head, anger replacing surprise. He charged again, throwing multiple punches that Elijah slipped or blocked with textbook precision. The ease with which Elijah evaded Damon's attacks made it clear to everyone watching that this was not beginner's luck. After letting Damon tire himself out, Elijah went on the offensive. His punches, though controlled as Coach had instructed, landed with surgical precision. Each hit was technically perfect, economical in movement, but devastating in impact. "Where did you learn to fight like that?" someone whispered loudly from the crowd. Within 2 minutes, Damon was breathing heavily. His previous confidence evaporated. When coach finally called time, there was no question who had dominated the match. As they removed their headgear, Damon avoided Elijah's eyes. "I've been training in Muay Thai since I was 8, Elijah said, his voice carrying across the now silent gym. Not a hint of a stutter. "I'm a 3-time junior champion. I could have hurt you badly any of the times you pushed me, tripped me, or mocked me, but I chose not to." He looked around at the stunned faces of his classmates. "My stutter doesn't make me weak. It doesn't define me, and it sure as hell doesn't give anyone the right to treat me like garbage." With that, he walked off the mat, leaving Damon standing there, embarrassed and exposed. Tyler stepped forward, anger flashing in his eyes. "Let me try him, coach." Coach Brenner looked at Elijah, who simply nodded. The result was even more decisive. Tyler, for all his height, had none of Elijah's technical skill. Within 30 seconds, he was backing away, overwhelmed by Elijah's controlled aggression and pinpoint accuracy. When Marcus declined his turn with a mumbled excuse about a shoulder injury, the message was clear to everyone. The balance of power had shifted. After class, as Elijah changed in the locker room, he felt the stares of his classmates, no longer mocking but curious and somewhat awed. Lisa was waiting for him outside the gym, having heard what happened through the rapid-fire gossip network of the school. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked as they walked toward the parking lot. "I don't like talking about it," Elijah replied, his stutter returning now that the adrenaline had worn off. "People either don't believe me or they want me to prove it." "Well, you certainly proved it today," she said, something like admiration in her voice. I heard Damon look like he saw a ghost. Elijah allowed himself a small smile. He saw the real me, that's all. The change in dynamics was immediate and dramatic. The next day, Elijah walked through the hallways with his head up, no longer trying to make himself invisible. Students who had previously ignored him now nodded in greeting or looked at him with newfound respect. Damon and his friends gave Elijah a wide berth, their previous swagger noticeably diminished. Once, Elijah caught Damon watching him with an unreadable expression from across the cafeteria, but the bully quickly looked away when their eyes met. Word of Elijah's fighting skills spread throughout the school, growing more exaggerated with each retelling. By lunchtime, rumor had it that he was an underground fighting champion who had once knocked out a professional boxer. Not true, Elijah told Lisa as they sat together in the cafeteria, now joined by a few other students who had suddenly discovered an interest in befriending him. "I'm just a kid who trains hard." "Still," said Brian, a fellow sophomore who had never spoken to Elijah before, "it was awesome how you stood up to Damon. Nobody does that." "Someone should have," Elijah replied, "but bullies only have power if everyone stays so scared." After school, Elijah was surprised to find Coach Brenner waiting for him by his locker. "Got a minute, Chen?" the coach asked. Elijah nodded, wondering if he was in trouble for the sparring matches. "I owe you an apology," Coach said, his voice gruff but sincere. "I should have stepped in sooner with Wright and his friends. I saw what was happening, but—" He trailed off, running a hand through his thinning hair. "It's okay," Elijah said quietly. "No, it's not," Coach insisted. "But I'm impressed with how you handled yourself. Not just the fighting. Anyone can throw a punch. But you showed restraint, control. You made your point without hurting anyone's pride more than necessary." Elijah hadn't expected this conversation, nor the grudging respect in the coach's voice. "I'm starting an after-school boxing program," Coach continued. "Could use someone with your experience to help demonstrate proper technique." "Interested?" Elijah considered it. "I could do that." Coach nodded. "Good, and Chen? Your stutter." Elijah tensed, preparing for the usual awkward comments or advice. "It's just a way of speaking," Coach finished. "Doesn't change who you are or what you can do. Remember that." With that, he walked away, leaving Elijah slightly stunned by the unexpected support. The final surprise came 3 days later, when Damon approached Elijah after the final bell. He stood alone without Tyler or Marcus flanking him for the first time Elijah could remember. "Can we talk?" Damon asked, his usual arrogance notably absent. Elijah hesitated, then nodded. They walked to the empty bleachers by the football field, an awkward silence between them. "I was a jerk," Damon finally said, staring at the ground. "The stuff about your stutter, that was low." Elijah waited, sensing there was more. "My little brother has a stutter," Damon continued, the admission clearly difficult for him. "Bad one. Worse than yours. He's in middle school, and he gets bullied for it all the time." This was the last thing Elijah had expected to hear. I should be defending kids like you, not targeting them, Damon said. Instead, I was worse than the guys who pick on my brother. Pretty messed up, right? Why are you telling me this? Elijah asked. Damon shrugged. I don't know. Maybe seeing you stand up for yourself made me realize what my brother needs to see, that having a stutter doesn't make you weak. He extended his hand. I'm not asking to be friends or anything, just, I'm sorry and it won't happen again. Elijah looked at the offered hand, thinking of all the humiliation, the anger, the frustration of the past weeks. Then he thought of Ajahn Somchai's teachings about respect and forgiveness. He shook Damon's hand. Okay, no grand speech, no dramatic declarations, just acknowledgement and the possibility of moving forward. As Damon walked away, Elijah remained on the bleachers, watching the clouds drift across the Colorado sky. For the first time since moving, he felt at home. Not because everyone now knew about his fighting skills, but because he had finally stopped hiding who he truly was. His phone vibrated with a text from his mother. How was school today? Elijah smiled and typed back, good, really good. I'll tell you all about it when you get home. Later that evening, as he trained in his garage, throwing combinations at his heavy bag with practiced precision, Elijah reflected on everything that had changed. The stares in the hallway would eventually fade. The exaggerated stories would be replaced by new gossip. But something fundamental had shifted inside him. He wasn't just the quiet storm in the ring anymore. He was Elijah Chen, a fighter both inside and outside the ropes, stutter and all. And that was something no one could ever take away from him. Now, if you liked this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to support us. Your subscription is very important to us. We need your support, so please subscribe and leave a comment telling me your opinion. Besides that, it's not over. Yet there's one more case for you to watch playing on your screen now. Click on it and I'm waiting for you. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.